Good evening, everyone. My name is Khadija Ba, and I am the Communications Officer for ChildLink Inc. Thank you so very much for joining us this evening on our panel discussion titled Raising Children, the Blue Edition. This panel is part of the Recovery, Safeguarding and Reintegration Initiative supported by the delegation of the European Union to Ghana. With us this evening, we have Reverend Neilford Chase, who is the Reverend of North Roundville Church of the Nazarene, Miss Cara Lord, who is an educator at the University of Ghana. She is teaching in the areas of counseling, educational, and developmental psychology, and Miss Kathleen Reed, who is a teacher at Covent Garden Secondary School. We will start with Reverend Chase, then move to Cara Lord, and then Miss Kathleen Reed. That will be the order of the panelists. So if you guys can go ahead and just introduce yourselves quickly.
Pleasant good evening to you, Khadija. I think that's it, right? As well as to the Guyanese public, wherever you're looking at us from. Good evening to you. It is always a joy to be here. Like host said, I serve as the pastor of the North Roundville Church of the Nazarene, and I'm just happy to be here. I'm just happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Pastor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the brief introduction, Khadija. My name is Cara Lord, and as mentioned, I am a lecturer at the University of Guyana. I teach in the area of psychology, number of subsections under that, and I also do some consultancy work in the areas of human resource development and organizational development. And I also I'm studying, so I'm a student as well, and I'm also a mom. So I think those are the little things that I'll say for my introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Kathleen?
Good evening again. Khadija, thank you for having me here again. I thoroughly enjoyed our last discussion, and I hope tonight's one is as fun and enlightening. Um, I'm a teacher and I'm a parent as well, and I am happy that I'm here as well.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, Cara, and Reverend Chase. So to get the ball rolling, Reverend, what are some of the best experiences you've had raising your sons?
I like the question because I think it's an interesting question for me. Um, but if I can back up a little bit, because I want to immediately dispel the notion that when it comes to raising our sons, that they don't express how they feel. I think as a father, I've come to understand how my sons are able to express themselves. It is different from my daughter, but I've come to really appreciate how they have been able to do what they do and say what they say the way they need to say. And so for me, the best experiences are two. It is first understanding how to affirm them as young men, how to affirm them, how to celebrate them. And then the second one is how to love them in their element, how to love them for who they are. And that for me is some of the best experiences I've had so far raising my sons.
Thank you so much, Pastor.
Khadija, would you
Karstein.
like me to jump in and go ahead? Okay, I'm sorry. This is my first time, so I didn't know it was like a running situation. I thought you, okay, sure. So, two things that I want to share. Just to say, I have one boy. That's my only child. That's the only child that I've born, if I can say it that way. Yeah. So I want to say that he is in a specific age group that you would call maybe early to middle childhood. And so if I'm speaking from experience, I'm going to speak from my experience as I know with him, from birth coming up to that period of time. What I would say are my favorite experiences with him are two main things that I want to point out, that just not to drag along the conversation. One, it is the fact that he is a really loving, affectionate person. I don't know specifically if he gets that from me or if that's just his express himself, but I've always found him to be a just kind of caring, kind. I don't want to say clingy, but we spent a lot of snuggle time, and I really, really enjoy that. As well, I think one of my best experiences is just watching him grow, and a part of that growing is learning, and just to kind of see where he is now and where he's come from, and then being a part of that process, even more so now with the online education that we're experiencing because he does go to school in a virtual environment and I need to be there to kind of support him. So even in that experience, just kind of physically seeing him growing and learning is certainly one of the best, most satisfying experiences that I've had so far.
Thanks, Kyra. Kathleen?
Yes, for me, there are three things that stood out. One, his playfulness, and I don't mean that in a bad way. He plays a lot. And when he was much younger, I would find myself outside with him, running around playing cricket, football, tennis, whatever. Sometimes we just play, run around the yard, catching one another. Now I'm not as energetic, so I don't play with him as much outdoors, but that's one of the best experiences I've had with him growing up. Another thing that I thoroughly enjoy is our movie nights. Normally on Friday nights, we would get whatever, something off of our normal meal, and we turn off the lights, lie on the couch, and watch TV until we fall asleep. Now I would normally fall asleep like quarter way into the movies, but we still have that time where we lie with one another and look at me. Another thing I thoroughly enjoy with him is his brilliance. Um, his ability to create stories and talk. He talks a lot. Maybe he probably got that from me, but he talks. I remember when he was smaller, the child would literally talk himself to sleep. He would be talking like for 15 to 20 minutes, and the next thing there is silence. When you check, he's fast asleep. So, yes, those are the three things, the three experiences that I had with him that I thoroughly enjoy.
Now, in an on the other side of things, what are a few things you didn't necessarily enjoy raising sons or a son in your cases?
We going with with Kathleen first, or are we coming back that way
No,
and come
back
back?
to you, Reverend Jace. Back to you.
Um, I think one of the things that I have a challenge with is when it comes to sons is the understanding that they're going to be men, um,
Mhm.
and so they have that kind of brash way of dealing with things. It's not the same as my girls, and so for me that can be where the challenge is because you have to change gears when it comes to your sons, and so the challenges, the things that you don't enjoy, uh, can really be the battle because we I grew up with a single parent mother, and with a single parent mother, I was taught some things about the how to express yourself. And so when it comes to raising sons as a man and dealing with having to unlearn some of the softer things that I've had to learn and be a little bit more factual with my sons, I think those are some of the challenges. It's not with them, it is more with me, the individual, adjusting so that I can nurture what is on the inside of them and help them to become who God wants them to be.
If I can start from a place a little bit further back, not necessarily a challenge, but a place where, when I was expecting a child, I was more apprehensive and scared and worried about. I think the expectations that we have, the differences that we have for boys and girls, and so during that time while I was pregnant, and I didn't know what I was, what gender to get as yet. I wasn't sure what to expect, but then once I found out, I find it's easier to be a girl as a child. I mean, it's just not the same kind of peer pressure. There's a lot more understanding. You get away with a bit more as well. And to me, boys bully really, really tough. They're really rough on each other. I don't want nobody smacking my child around on the playground. I was really worried about those things. I mean, I was a child, but I could go and tell the teacher, and then the teacher will deal with that for me, and nobody will think she's less because of the teacher. But have this kind of thing where you expect them to be strong, you expect them to stand up for themselves, and I was really worried it meant for my son growing up amongst other children, and then of course becoming an adult where he's expected to be a leader, a man, responsible, and in all these different ways. The challenges that I have with him now are, not quite what I expected. I think the biggest challenge, and I don't think it's limited to him being a boy because I see some of who I was as a child as a girl, a boy child. My major challenge is really, he is in terms of expressing himself. He will say what he feels like he would like to say, and he'll come to you very mature and say, "Mommy, I have something I want to speak with you about." And he'll express himself. He'll say what he wants to say, and it's my duty to then listen and see how we talk. So like I'm not necessarily dealing with a child per se. I'm more dealing with a little person. But then the challenge is then ensuring that I don't make too many trade-offs between treating him like he is there's some kind of mutual respect, like not really an adult, but still a sense of respect, and then treating him as a child because there comes a time where because we have certain talks, he feels like he can say certain things or he can express himself in a way I expect someone who is a little bit more mature to do. And so we have to kind of really try to work every day on defining what the lines are. And then, of course, that comes again to breaking down the mother-child barrier, and then ensuring that he's comfortable to say certain things. It's really just kind of there's certain nuances that are difficult to navigate. And as a boy child, and I feel it may be some. I'm not saying it's limited to boy children because you can find it in girls as well, but there is a consistent push and pull for not necessarily leadership, but to test the waters and to see how much he can do, how much he can get away with, how much I will allow, what tone to go into to manipulate me into ensuring that he can get what he wants. And um,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, for me, right now at the stage that he's in, those are the major challenges that I am dealing with. Obviously, there are a lot of expectations I have as he gets earlier and he's going into his own and he continues to learn and develop, especially as he goes into teens. I'm looking forward to those years.
Yes,
Thanks,
well,
Kathleen.
sorry. For me, listen, boys break everything, right? They climb everything, and everything is a ball. Whether it's a piece of brick that potentially break the television, or paper rolled up, or food, whatever it is, everything is a ball. And the best place to play with it is in the house where you could break something. So I have found that not annoying, but sometimes, a little challenging to deal with. Um, Also, when it comes to grooming, I don't think boys are really concerned whether they have a shower or whether they comb their hair or whether they cream their skin and so on. So these are the things that I have to be consistent with so that they actually happen. Um, Another challenge that I find is that I don't know if I am overprotective, but I feel the need to protect him. So like I do not send him over to his friend's house. I do not send him over to visit anybody if I'm not there. I feel like it's my responsibility. Years ago, we were taught we need to protect our little girls, right? So now I have this notion that it's also our responsibility to protect our boys. And I try as best as I could to keep him safe, to keep him I don't want to say isolated, but sometimes I feel as though I'm isolating him. So I find it quite challenging there to find a balance between letting him be a boy, letting him go out and do stuff, and at the same time keeping him safe from all of the potential dangers that are out there. Because we know oftentimes our boys turn into men and things in their childhood when we are not careful and we allow situations to arise where certain things could happen to them. It affects them all the way into their adulthood. And I know being overprotective could affect him as well. So I'm struggling with finding the balance where I let him roam free and I keep him safe and protected.
If I could jump back
Interesting.
in really quickly, Khadija,
I wanted to
I
jump
really
in.
want
Go,
to
Carol.
just
Go,
kind of,
Carol.
yes,
Go ahead.
no,
Go
I'll
ahead.
let
Go
you go. I
ahead.
just wanted to make sure I didn't miss the opportunity. As
Yeah.
you brought up some really, really great points. I have some similar problems where it relates to getting my child in the shower. To get him there is a challenge, but once he gets there, he doesn't want to come out. Finds ways to play in there and have a great time. So I feel you on those challenges. You've something that is so significant in my mind, and it causes me to think whether there has really been a shift or if we're in a process towards a shift or a transition in how we treat boy children. Because when I was growing up, there was I grew up with brothers, so I have two brothers that I've lived with, two brothers that I haven't lived with, but I know them as my brothers. So I have four brothers altogether, and I don't have any sisters. I have cousins, but I don't have any sisters. So for my parents, their goal was always ensuring that they're very protective over me. I would see my older brother just literally get away with going here, there, left, right, and center, and I wanted to do things. I wanted to get out, and that was a challenge for me. But today, I think perhaps we are a little bit more protective of our boys, and we recognize that there is a need to shelter them and not to throw them out into the wilderness and hope that it works out for the best for them. And there are pros and cons to that, and I don't want to go into it too much, but certainly I do see that I feel the same way. That's why I said I don't want anybody smacking my child around, even on the playground. So imagine when he gets older, I don't need people taking advantage of him or sending him out, and then I have to worry that he's picking up with the wrong crowd or he's hanging out on the corner. I know that he'll be his own person, but certainly those are things that I would really like to protect him from, and so I don't know if it's a situation where as the generation continues along, we're just like, okay, well, boys and girls are different, but they're still not so different in terms of the way that we should treat them, in terms of our parental style and our approach towards them. So already we've talked about things like just allowing them to express themselves and ensuring that they have that opportunity to grow into their becoming their own man and those kinds of things. So I really don't know, but certainly I see a bit of a shift in how we are treating boys, and perhaps some families are still a bit more traditional, but perhaps particularly single moms may be moving moving in a different direction towards how they treat their boys. Go ahead, Reverend
Can I
Doctor.
jump in there? Because one of the things that I found and I am very concerned about as a father, particularly coming out of a single parent home, is the mummification of our boys. They become mama's boys. And the problem with mama's boys is that when they go into society and they're dealing with other young men like themselves, they can't cope. All right. And the reason for that is the affirmation that comes from the father, the development of the identity that comes from the father is lost, not because mommy is not doing a good job, but mommy gets emotional about everything. And like Kara said earlier, if somebody push you, mommy's ready to run into school and she's ready to talk to the teacher and she's ready to let the teacher know that this is his son and nobody shouldn't touch him. And don't recognize that when she does that, his image as a young man is going to be affected. The view of other young men of him is going to be affected. And so we've got to be careful with that mummification of our boys. And we see it because when we look back at society as a whole, while we live in a patriarchal society, the nurturing of the children were left to the females. And so for generations, we've seen that missifying of our boys, the mummification, I like to say, of our boys. Everything is about mommy. We turn to mommy, we go to mommy. And that becomes a challenge because to learn how to affirm yourself, to learn how to be yourself as a man, you oftentimes have to step out from that image. And the problem with the pushback single mothers get that they don't understand is when the young man gets to teenage years and he's stepping out of that mummification mode, there's a pushback against mommy. And mommy don't understand it because mommy think he's disrespectful. But it's not really disrespect. He's still trying to find himself. And so he's going to push back. There's some things you're going to say he is not going to want to hear. When you are trying to love up on him and kiss up on him. And I took note, Car, because you said this snuggling up. That's good for now. Kathleen talked about the movie Nice, and we are there snuggling up. That's good. But when he gets to teenage years, that is no longer going to work. My teenage son expresses himself so much different from my daughter. He is not, I can't hug him up like I used to when he was a baby, but I can pong him. And I have to understand that the fist pong is still an expression of love. I heal up, how you're doing a touch on the fist. That is still an expression of love. But because we have so mummified our boys, it becomes a challenge as we grow and as they grow.
But you see, if I kind of comes back, I'm not disputing anything you said, but it comes back to the point that I made very early on about this kind of stereotype attached to what we expect from our boys. And so it's
Mhm.
difficult for them. That's why I still think it's easier for a girl child coming up because then, yes, we have expectations of her, but we're not so hard on her if we don't see what we want to see. But with boys, if we don't get that kind of masculinity that we want to get, even very early on at an early age, then we do judge them. And that's not, I'm not saying we as parents, I'm saying, as you mentioned, their peers, their
Society
friends,
as a whole.
people around
Right.
them will look at them and then will classify them and taunt them. And that will, of course, affect their self esteem and all of that. So,
Mhm.
yeah, thank you for that. And I do appreciate yeah, your comments. Certainly I don't disagree with
It,
any part of it.
it's it's an important thing for the boys to have the love of a man because the man becomes the role model. He becomes the example. He becomes the standard. Bible tells us in Matthew chapter 4, chapter 3, I think it is. Yes, Matthew chapter 3. When Jesus was coming onto the scene, the first thing his father did was said, "This is my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased." And so one of the first things a father does is give that affirmation to the son, and our sons need that kind of affirmation, and that's why it's important. That's why we say it's important even as men, within the church, within our spirits, to ensure that you are an influence in the life of another young man, because he needs that affirmation. If you don't get that affirmation, even for me, when I became a pastor, because I didn't have that affirmation, it was a difficulty because I pushed back hard against male authority figures because I was so caught up in being this boy that was raised with a mother that I didn't even understand the value and the role they men play in helping me to understand who I am. And so as a parent, that's one of the things I push for to help my sons identify and affirm them for who they are.
The three of you for that discussion. Actually, I want to go back to well, the next question actually is actually goes in tandem with something that Kara said earlier. The comment that she made with the parenting styles. So the third question, and Reverend Chase, you can start again. How has your parenting style to your sons evolved or changed over the years?
I like that question because as I was thinking about it earlier, I recognize parenting is like an OJT, an on-the-job training. Doesn't matter how much skill you get. It doesn't matter how much you think you know. When you begin to parent, you will have to make adjustments on the fly. Um, because there are things that you can do when a boy is at 2 years old that when he gets to five you can't do, that when he gets to seven you can't do, when he gets to 10 you can't do. And so for me, that is where the evolution takes place. And we have to recognize that evolution is not necessarily a plan, it's a reality. You just wake up one day, you know, I've changed, things have changed. um, I wake up one day and I recognize that my son got two hair on his face, and he's thinking he has arrived. He get beard or he get two hair at the top of the lip and he thinks, well, I just get moustache. And so I am the adult now. And so for me, you are evolving all the time because as you learn, you have to change. And so you can't stick to any one approach. I know that is what we society says to us, but really and truly, you can't stick to one single approach when it comes to raising either boys or girls.
Yeah, certainly I would say that if I can respond to the question, I don't want to jump in too early, but I think for me, there certainly is a transition, not just in his age or in his stages. So there's not just an evolution in terms of, okay, well, he was two then, and now he's four later, and then he's six after. And so I transitioned throughout my, I think daily, I probably exhibit different styles depending on what the context is, what the situation is. So I might be a little bit more of a disciplinarian if that's what it calls for at that period of time. And then I might allow him to kind of chime in with me and make some decisions if we're going to decide, what movie we're going to watch or, so it depends on what's happening for me. Certainly when he was a lot younger, I would say that I was much more of a nurturer. And to be very, very honest, when I was having a child, and of course, as Reverend Chase said, it's really an on the job training kind of situation. I did not know what to expect. I remember saying to my husband at that time that I'm going to be a very strong mom because I need to have well-mannered children, good children, well-behaved, well-disciplined. I want them to go out in society. I want them to do well and be good people and stuff. And so I had this thing, and he was like, "You're not beating my child." And I was just like, "Yeah, your child is gonna get licked." And when he was born, the thought completely drifted from my mind that I can't hit this child. I mean, you would get frustrated, but then the love that you that I felt, especially in his younger years, the love that I feel is just like I don't want to discipline him in that way. I want to find other ways of how I can teach him, about life, about what's okay, what's not okay, what's expected, what's not expected. And then also in this at the same time, not kind of clip his wings so that I am not just instilling traditional values, but I'm also allowing him to discover them um, on his own. So certainly, I would say within the I might wake up with very good intentions, like I'm gonna be a great mom today. I'm gonna be super happy, very positive about everything. I'm gonna be yes, great job, son. And then he'll do something, and then I'll lose it for a split second, and then I'll pull him back in, and then I'll breathe and rein myself back in, and we'll have a talk about that, and then we'll move forward and pretend like mommy didn't lose it for about 10 seconds there.
See how easy
Yeah,
it is
but
for
yeah,
mommy to
it
lose it?
changes moment to moment. Yes, because mommies are emotional. Yeah, mommies need you to
It's not
listen.
easy for
Okay,
them to get it
boys,
back.
children listen
No,
to
but
daddies because mommies
it
are, I don't know, a little bit more flexible. So children listen to
because
daddy. So when daddy says sit there and do your homework, you are because you. I don't know if it's fair. I don't want to give my mouth liberty, but you know that if daddy said to do that, you need to do that. If mommy said to do that, that's not mommy. All right. And then next thing you know, probably start doing it, then move up doing something else. If I don't watch him, he can start playing a game. He can start watching a video on YouTube. I gotta go back again. I said, didn't I say do that? So it's
that's
different
because
when you're a daddy.
'cause that's
It's
the
different when you're a
affirmation coming
daddy.
out. That
Children
is the
listen to
affirmation,
daddies.
and it comes out in presence.
Well,
All
I am
right.
saying to you that my son listens to me when I freak out. Okay? So I freak out sometimes and then I don't hit him. It's not about hitting. I do freak out sometimes. I get a bit loud and then I calm back down and I say, good, let's talk about this, and we settle that and we move forward from there. And we work on not having freakouts in future because I would really love, and I don't freak out first attempt. I'm admitting I'm confessing some things here to you guys publicly. I don't freak out first attempt. It is a replay of saying the same thing over and over again that will eventually cause me to get there. I don't know how we got from parenting styles to here, but yes, I have good intentions, and that's what I'll see. Always start with good intentions at the beginning.
That's the
But
conclusion.
from
You
the
That's a
time
have
I
good
really
can't
great
wake
intentions.
conversation.
from the time I can't wake him up to get to class on time, we're gonna have a problem. So one day at a time is how I take it.
Kathleen, how about you?
Yes. Well, for me, there are certain things that are important for me, and I want them to be important to him as well. So throughout the years, I've been consistent with these things. One, his spiritual life. It's very important to me that he develops a spiritual life. He has a relationship with God because I think having a strong spiritual life is going to influence a lot of decisions that he make in life that he makes. Sorry. So, um, as he goes along, he's going to learn more and develop his spiritual life. But for now, I would have him read his Bible, ask questions, pray. I want him to develop the habit of communicating with God, right? Another thing that is important to me is education, and I push him where his books are concerned. I want him to be successful, and I let him know that I have expectations. I have great expectations. I let him know what I expect of him when it comes to his work, and he knows that he has the ability and he has the support system he needs. So we're not slacking up with him where education is concerned. Um, Another thing that we focus on, right, is humanity. I want him to be able, and these are traits that he already has, right? So we just reinforce them with him. Being kind and thoughtful and compassionate. Um, I remember when he was much smaller, whenever we would go into Georgetown, I would have to have a lot of change in my purse because everywhere we walk and when he passed by somebody, they would have these men playing the drums on the side of the road, or anybody he sees, he would go into the bag and take out some change and put it into boxes and so on. And um, these are things that we saw in him from small. So we try to, let him know that he needs to continue along that line. And if he sees somebody is in need, he's going to try to help them as best as he could. If I am unwell, or if his dad, something is bothering any one of us, he's able to pick up on that. And he comes and he would offer a hug. And he's conscious of people's feelings, and he tries to make things better even at this age. Another thing that we're consistent with is his social graces. Now I'm having troubles with his table manners now. Troubles that recently came about, right? I don't know if it's his growing up stage and he just feels he could sit anyhow at the table and so on. But another thing that he does, if we have a visitor, he would go out, open the gate, take their, especially if it's a woman, he takes their bags, he brings it in, takes it upstairs to the room, he would offer them water, and so these are things that we consistently try to develop in him further because it's already there, right? Now, one of the things that I have started doing is, and this is not something I'm too proud of, but I have been the disciplinarian, right? So I would tell his dad if he does something, and when they're having a conversation, I would listen in to hear if I approve of what his dad is telling him.
What?
I find myself intervening. So his dad is dealing with it his way, but I would intervene and try to deal with it my way at the same.
can't
So now
can't let
try
up on the mummifying.
Not at
now
all.
and sometimes I would even go away into the room just so I wouldn't hear their conversations because I'm trying not to. I'm trying to allow his dad to discipline him sometimes. And
But it,
Kara said something interesting where the boys, they don't really, they take the mothers for granted more in terms where discipline is concerned. When the dad says go, they go. Well, it's the other way around for me. I'm the one who his dad is more laid back when it comes to discipline. He talks to him, they have a conversation about it, and that's it, right? But for me, in my mind, I think that something, he should have been a little sterner or something else. I am thinking in my mind that this is not how it should have been resolved. So I
sorry,
am
uh,
I'm not gonna
I'm just thinking
respond. I'm
here.
not
I'm just
responding.
thinking here how easy it is for for mothers to think it is laid back. It is not being laid back. It is teaching your son to be responsible for the choices he makes. But mommy wants you to come on this line because she has in her head this fear that if you don't come this way, then she is seeing 20 years down the road and thinking, well, 20 years down the road, he's going to broke out. Forgive my language. So you tend to think I've got to keep the harness on him now so that 20 years down the road, he is going to break out. The thing about it is that harness 20 years down the road that you think would keep him is what causes him to run away. But with daddy, daddy begins to teach him, listen, you've got to be responsible for the choices you make. And so sometimes it seems as if it's a laid back approach, but it is not a laid back approach. It is really helping him to appreciate that you have made a decision and you've got to learn how to deal with the consequences of those decisions. As a father, I watch my sons, and I've watched my sons, both my biological sons, and I've watched my sons in church. And I've said to them, you have got to make some decisions. I cannot run to you every time you make a decision and cover. You've got to learn from the mistakes you've made. You've got to learn from those experiences. But mommy sometimes don't want that to happen. Mommy wants to run in as soon as you fall down and put a bandage on your foot. Sometimes you've got to leave that foot a little bit open so that it can heal, you know. Um and that's why sometimes we find our sons struggling. And then we say they don't express themselves. And the reason we say they don't express themselves is because mommy's always there preventing an expression. So he can't get to shout when he's feeling pain, because before he can even shout, mommy's there with a bandage. Oh, come, let mommy kiss it for you. Let mommy put something on it for you. And all these kinds of things. So later on, when he has an opportunity to really express himself, we're surprised when he starts pushing back against those things. And we become uncomfortable. Mommy cry because guess what? I'm talking to you now. He's 15 and he listening to me. But you have to recognize he's pushing back, because as he come into young adulthood, he's now trying to find himself. But you were always there as a shield. And daddy understands that. That's why daddy don't say anything. Because daddy understands you've got to develop who you are so that you can project that to the world.
Yeah, but no,
Dr. Chase, I
I
want to say this really, really quickly. Sorry, if you just give me a quick, I want us to move on from here because Khadijah promised me a real hot question. And I don't think we've gotten it as yet. I want us to get there, right? But I want to say this in response. I don't want it to be a back and forth. Yeah, I want to
Hmm.
agree and disagree. I want to agree in saying that yes, there are certainly some nuances to how mommies deal with things that are different from how daddies deal with things. But I want to caution us in generalizations. Yeah. So as my colleague here, is it Caitlin mentioned? Is it Caitlin? No.
Kathleen.
Mentioned that Kathleen mentioned that, for her, she is more of the stern one in the household, and the dad is maybe a little bit more laid back as she would like to term it. And of course, you as a dad don't necessarily see it that way, and that's perfectly fine. I don't know if he's laid back. I'm not making any assumptions. But what I will say, the part that I disagree with, is that sometimes some fathers are not very forthcoming. So you are supposed to train up a child in the way that you expect or you want him or her to go.
Yeah,
And those ways don't necessarily leave them when they're older. They remember them. Certainly there may be some resistance to it as they grow up, but they always remember them. And hopefully if we train them well and we put them on the right path, it'll bring them back in. Hopefully. I ain't going into all of the different factors that cannot lead to that. There's certainly individual differences. But what I find that I want to disagree with is to say that some daddies do need to be a little bit careful in how they are allowing their children, especially boy children, and even more so girl children. No, this one is not for girl children, but as well for girl children, not leaving out the girls, because daddies tend to have a way of not saying things and expecting children will just figure it out. They'll just learn on their own. They'll just understand. And you see, mommies try to overcompensate sometimes to the fact that daddies are not doing the things that we think that they should be doing. And
yeah,
so
Thank
we're
you.
doing a lot
Thank
more
you. Thank you.
than
Thank you. Thank
we
you. Thank
ought to be
you.
doing.
I'm
Yes,
jumping in there because he said something interesting right here. Daddies tend to not do the things we women think they should be doing. And that's key right
that don't mean
there.
y'all don't need
What
to have
we
conversations with your sons. You need to
what
talk to them. You
what
need to say, this
we
is what is
women think we
expected,
should
this
be
is what
doing.
is right, this is what is wrong. Yes, you have to
What
make your own decisions
what
as you get older. But
we
at this
women
point,
think
you
we
are
should be
still a
doing.
child. And so certainly mommy and daddy is responsible for some of the decisions that you will make now because
Good.
it will affect
But
you and we are responsible
but
for you. But a lot of daddies not saying that. A lot of daddies just leaving them to fall down and bruise up the skin or cut up the self, and they're not helping them. You do need to help them to heal. Now, that's also something that's inaccurate. As a mother, my child fall and literally fall down. I will hope that he and see that I see. Because if he sees icy, then he can start crying. But once I ignore he might get up and run along. Sometimes he can come and tell me for me and say, please go along back your way. You don't hurt yourself bad enough for me to be bandaging, nothing, and all of that. So some mummies are like that. So I'm saying do not generalize based on what your thoughts are about
Yeah.
the mothers. Eh?
All right.
All
Can I
right,
I
then
ask
I
a flip
guess.
question? Can I ask a flip
I like
question?
it.
Can I ask a flip question? Because I think this is interesting. I love this. I want to ask a flip question. How many times do husbands or fathers say, Mommy, I think you should do this the way I do it? Very rarely. You fathers allow
And
mothers
I
to
give
do
my
their
mouth
thing.
liberty on that. I don't have an actual survey of that
All right?
information, so I will
Most
not give
times
my mouth liberty.
daddies allow mothers to do the thing. This is your thing, this is your way of doing it, do it. But the moment daddy steps in, mommy's still on his shoulder. And I'm a husband, I know that. Still on the shoulder saying, but you know you should have said this, or you know you could have do it that way. And so what has happened, and I've talked to a lot of men who've said this, once mommy starts to do that, I back off because it makes no sense I speak. So I back off because you're not giving me the room to do what I need to do. You're always there telling me this is how I think you should do it. So after a while, men say, well, since you have got all the answers, you do your thing. You may not hear it because they're not going to tell you that. But when they gather as men, they tell that to we say that to each other because that's the reality. Since you have all the answers, then fine. And we only step in when things get when you think you can no longer deal with it and you start saying, I can tell your father, I can tell your father. So we turn up like the big bad policeman now to fix the thing because you couldn't fix the thing all the time. You weren't allowing me to fix the thing. So now I got turned up like the big bad policeman to fix it because you were not allowing me to fix it from before. All right. Now it don't always happen that way, but generally that's what a lot of fathers are dealing with. So we've got to appreciate that, and it's not just when it comes to raising our boys; it is also when it comes to raising our girls, because that is the kind of back and forth we face. Our society, while patriarchal, is still one where mommy does the bulk of the nurturing, and because
Yeah.
mommy does the bulk of the nurturing, mommy tend to think my idea is the best idea in the world. My way
Usually.
is the best way in the world. So you got to, as a father, you better come up to this standard. This is my standard for my son and for my daughter. So I hear you. I hear where you come from. I hear where your mother teach you. But this is my standard. And that becomes the problem.
But are
Let's get to the hot question.
Hold on, hold on. We only have 12 minutes left, and we still have um 1 to 2 questions depending on. But this next question is just an open question. I know it's going to be quite controversial because it basically is asking about black and white gender roles. But the question is, and what I mean, it's open. It doesn't have to be that pastor starts or whoever. Whoever wants to start can go.
mhm.
What do you, as a parent, think is only applicable when raising your son versus what is applicable for both sons and daughters?
I'll jump in first. That's a bit of a tricky question, and the reason I wanted to jump in first is because I here. I'll say that for me, I think this is one of the reasons I brought up really early on the concern that I have about the stereotypes that we see in our society and the expectation of boys versus the expectation of girls. Because, as soon as a boy is not being the way that you want him to be, then look at him differently. Um, just growing up, and I'm not sure, what it's like today. I don't have a boy and a girl. I just have a boy. So probably Dr. Chase can speak to this a little bit. I mean, it's more you see things like, okay, boys play with, we have the color. So I mean, boys' favorite color might not be blue, but certainly when you're getting a boy, mostly by colors. I think are more masculine when you're a girl. So you maybe choose your pink and your yellows, and for the boys you might choose your blue and your greens and your reds. Those seem a little bit more masculine. Certainly having my boy, we didn't buy any pink clothes for him. Uh,
Hey,
cold.
we men wear pink, yeah?
We didn't have, his dad didn't have a problem with that, and of course I don't have a problem. Still a bit strict in terms of not playing with dolls and those kinds of things. I am very, I don't know, sympathetic is the word that I want to use, but I am very conscious and open-minded about the fact that there are children who are growing up in homes and certainly in a society where they're not so free to express themselves and to behave in ways that they natural. And a part of that is because parents do have expectations gender wise based on how they should behave, how they should act, how they should think, how they should speak, how they should dress, how they should portray themselves. And if they don't fall in line with that, then we do what we can to rein them back from their forming to what society's expectations. Our version of the answer is that I, but I obviously, his dad will have a different say on that, as I'm sure all will have their on that. And I'm not one against if you say so. I'm not really one to go against it and have an argument about it. But I am conscious about that, about forcing or not forcing, working to instill the traditional roles in our children. And I think in doing so, we are limiting what their experiences are, and of course, how that affects their holistic development.
All right,
Thanks,
Kathleen, go
Kara.
ahead. I like your question though, and I'll just say this.
Probably an awful question. So
I think for me though, what is applicable to my son and not my daughters, my sons and not my daughters, is how I express love to them. I cannot do it the same way I express love to my daughter. And so for me, that's one of the key areas. Also, how we conversate. I can't conversate the same way with my sons as against my daughters. And then all the another key one is how I challenge them. Um, that for me is also important. How I challenge them. I cannot do it the same way as I do it for my daughters. My sons are unique in themselves, and so I've had to learn how to tap into who they are and to pull that out of them. And so that is just unique for them and not for my daughters.
Kathleen, do you have anything to add to this?
I am not sure that I do because I haven't raised a daughter, so I will not be speaking from a place of knowledge or experience. So I
Right.
know we're living in a society now where people say, anything that a boy could do, a girl could do. And so I don't want to get too controversial. Um,
I want it a little bit controversial, though. I have a little follow-up question for Reverend Chase based on his response, because he said he cannot motivate is not the word you use. Is it motivate? You
Challenge.
said
Challenge?
challenge. You
Challenge.
cannot challenge your daughters the same way you challenge your boys. So
Mhm.
does, I want to make sure I'm clear. That means that you still do them, right?
Sorry?
Or what is it? You do still challenge your daughter, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
But how is that different from how you challenge your son?
It is different because the approach has to be different. My sons are more practical, and boys are usually much more practical. And so when you're challenging your sons, you have to be a little bit more practical and factual, as against when I'm challenging my daughter, I can use the emotional arguments.
Nah, I
You
can't agree
know,
with you there. I can't. I can't do it with you. I can't do it with
so
you. I
I
tried.
can
I
use
really
the
tried. I
emotional
can't do it
argument.
with
I
you.
can use the
Mm,
argument that says, "Listen."
Oh
So,
no.
so
I
for my
can't do that. I
sons,
can't do
I
that.
have to be a little
No.
bit more practical, goal oriented. This is the
No, I gotta
target you need
disagree
to
with you
meet.
there. I have to
All
disagree with
right.
you there. You
So,
see, that's the reason that I'm very I don't want to say weird, but I'm
see,
very conscious
and
about
now,
the gender
now you ladies
nuances
have my daughter looking at me like
because
an eagle.
no, she knows me. Don't worry, she knows me. I'm not so. It's been a while since I've seen your kids, but they've at least seen me at least once or twice around. Yeah, I'm a Nazarene. But what I'm saying is that I can speak from a point of experience that
Mhm.
girls are not. It's not that we're not emotional, yeah, but if you look at personality types in people, for example, if you're talking about me, I have a type of personality that is really very based on facts and statistics and understand. And that's why even when we you asked the question earlier, I said, I don't have the information to speak to it, so I wouldn't speak to it because I don't want to give my mouth liberty in that. So I want us to be very careful in how we're generalizing our expectations about gender roles. I mean, perhaps your daughter is a little bit more open to receiving an argument that is based on emotions, but that's not for me, for sure. And as far as I've checked from birth to now, I am
Well, remember, it
a
was
girl and
a
I'm a
personalized
woman.
question.
Right, but I'm
So,
saying I don't. We're speaking publicly, and I don't want people to run away with that thinking that it's
Yeah.
okay to challenge our girls and boys differently. And with that,
yeah,
I'll leave that conversation there. But thanks
uh,
so much for
our
indulging.
time is up.
All right. So, the very last question, you guys can answer it in like one line. What advice would you have for new parents of boys in this generation?
I
Just
say
teach
this:
them.
parenting is like an artist. You learn some techniques, but you have to find the thing that will work for you. In every situation, find what will work for you. Not all artists are the same, and not every approach to parenting must be the same.
Thank you so much, Reverend.
Yeah, for me, I think we need to teach them to work hard, right? We need to develop, oh, this is more than a sentence. We need to instill in them the value of hard work. Boys are generally, well, they go into adulthood and they're seen as providers, protectors, and so on, right? So, as parents in this generation, we need to raise our boys, teach them the value of working hard. You work hard, you achieve a lot of things.
I don't know if my
Thanks,
comments
Kathleen.
are going to be limited to boys, but what I would say is, more, it's very much in line with what Reverend Chase has said, is really in a different way, just kind of being open minded. And there's no way for you to be prepared, but certainly trying a lot of different options and looking at the context and thinking about what, the best way to deal with this might be. I mean, trying different ways is always a good idea. So as much as you can, be conscious of that person as an individual, boy, girl, whatever however you term it. But yeah, um, and show a lot of love. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the three of you for joining. This brings us to the end of our discussion. As I said before, my name is Khadija Ba. I'm the Communications Officer for ChildLink Inc. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us this evening. Our panel discussion focused on Raising Children, the Blue Edition. This panel discussion is part of the Recovery, Safeguarding and Reintegration Initiative supported by the delegation of the European Union to Ghana. We had with us this evening Ms. Cara Lord, Ms. Kathleen Reed, and Reverend Neilford Chase. Thank you so much to all of you, and I hope we had a good discussion.
Yeah.
Bye.